Ladies and gentlemen of the Employment Committee, it is 7 o'clock. We are live and streaming. So I will begin. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Jennings-Evans has sent her apologies, but she is joining virtually, but therefore won't be able to vote.
Okay. Minutes. Councillors, you've seen the minutes of the last meeting. Are you okay for me to sign them? I should do that at the end, apparently. Okay, declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests. Not seeing any. Excellent. We will move on to the meat of the meeting. Agenda item 4, the pay settlement. Now, you should have all been sent some documents by Louise earlier today that outline the, I think you've probably got them on your desks as well, the pay settlement and where we're at. Have people had a moment to look at these papers today? Because it is unusual for some people. That it won't be unusual because you won't have done this very many times before, but this is an unusual recommendation from the, or to the Employment Committee, insofar as there are two recommendations, because the Joint Staff Committee, to where the discussions with staff are held, did not reach an agreement. So this committee is being, or is having both recommendations, the one from the staff, which is little 1, and the one from, and I guess from the member representatives, which is little 2. So I'm quite happy just to invite debate. My preference would be that this committee can reach a decision on what it wants to recommend to Council. I'm fairly confident, nonetheless, no matter what we agree, that it will be debated at some length, once again, at Council. But that is the way of the world. So I will open to questions. Councillor Bates, from his local, it would appear.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I suppose it's from my local. I do have beer in the corner, but no, this is actually from my flat. A very social, hospitable place it is, as those of you who visited will know. But in terms of the recommendation, I hope actually we don't need to discuss this at Council like last year, because the situation is actually a lot closer than it was last year. And there's actually a lot of common ground, as you can see. But I do want to make a couple of comments first, because I don't think the process has been that helpful. And I'm not the only councillor who thinks that. I haven't spoken to every member of the Joint Staff Group, but I know that there are others who share similar views to me. In terms of the initial offer that was made, I have to say it wasn't an offer I would have made. The one that was made to staff, as soon as I was made aware of it, I did express my concern about it, because I don't think it was appropriate. Although there were elements I did agree with, I do think it should be a flat fee, and the level is the issue I had a problem with, which I expressed at the time. In terms of the joint staff meeting itself, I couldn't attend the meeting, but I did attend the briefing, and then I had a subsequent briefing from Mrs. Livingston. My own view on this, for what it's worth, is that I do think a minimum of £500 is appropriate for this year as a lump sum for staff, as has been outlined by members. I didn't participate in the actual vote that took place, because I couldn't join the whole of the meeting, but the minimum for me would be £500. So I would have, and looking at the percentages, I think that is not unreasonable. I do accept that staff may consider differently. I think it's probably a bit of a shame if the presentation that was given to joint staff, which I have asked for and not received yet, that you haven't seen it, because I've heard it was very good, and is something that perhaps should be the program. Look, we're not there, so unless members have seen it privately. But looking at the actual percentages, on £500, that would result, as my understanding, is a 2.5% increase for those on £20,000 a year, 2% for those on 25, and I think I'm right in saying my maths isn't brilliant, but I think it's at 1.67 for those on 30k, and about 1.4 for those on 35k. I accept that people might want more. 350 would have been too low, but in the context of where we are as a council, I think that is not unreasonable. And if I had been at the meeting, I would have voted for the £500. I wouldn't have voted for the 650. But I do accept there is a lot of concern from staff about that. They feel that there is a need to increase it. I can see reasons why. I should stress one point, that when this was done, the council tax discount hadn't been known by the committee. So obviously those households those members of staff who live in bands A to D, we weren't aware that they would be getting a discount. So whether that makes an impact, I don't know. But certainly from my perspective, and I don't have a vote as you well know, I certainly wouldn't want to go lower than 500. And if you voted for 500, I personally wouldn't contest that at the full council meeting, which might please some of you. So that's kind of my position anyway.
Thank you. Anyone else? Graham.
Thank you. Yes, like Rodney, I'm afraid I had to miss that particular joint staff consultation group meeting, as I had another appointment on the day. So I sadly also didn't have the opportunity to listen to the arguments put forward by the staff representatives as to why they felt that £650 was an appropriate uplift to be awarded. So I'm really only going on the basis of what I've read here. I must admit, when I heard that our original offer was £350, I felt that was, personally, I felt that was a little insulting. But I think we all have to accept, and I think staff have to accept, that the whole country is going through difficult times at the present moment, and whilst it would be lovely for us to be able to insulate our employees from the effects of the economic downturn that the country is experiencing at the moment, and especially the hugely rising costs that we're all facing for energy and transport and all those sorts of things, I think they have to accept that whilst it would be nice for us to be able to afford to give them an uplift of £650, it just isn't on. And like Rodney, I believe that the sum that's been set, which is halfway between our original offer and what they've asked, is entirely reasonable under the circumstances, and that's what I will be voting for. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Mrs. Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I think linking back to a point that was made with Rodney as to where the original offer came from and the process that would normally be deployed, I'll take this off, when making an offer, I would have expected that an offer would go forward for discussion in the Joint Staff Consultative Committee before an offer was necessarily put forward. And I just wondered what the process was around this normally, and whether or not due process had been followed on this occasion. Because actually sometimes if you're offered something very low, which doesn't seem appropriate, your tendency is to go higher because you automatically feel undervalued. So I think that offer was unfortunate, and I think I would like to, maybe outside of this meeting, receive some understanding as to how that original offer was put forward and what the process should be. And then the other one is on page 4 of the update, 1.5. It was noted that this discussion should take place soon. Could we, before voting on this recommendation, have an understanding or a time frame for soon? Because I think if we are minded not to go with option I, that knowing when soon was may give some comfort. Thank you.
Okay, I'll deal with those in reverse order. I think soon is this evening, and I will hand over to the HR team to comment on the process.
So, councillors, the Chief Executive started the negotiations, but before we did that, we did write to all councillors on the Employment Committee and the Joint Staff Consultative Committee, just advising them of what that offer was going to be. And that was in light of the current budget, and that was taken into consideration when making that initial offer. But it was the fact that it was an initial offer. So it was the Chief Executive that did that as a starting point, but obviously realising that ultimately councillors make that final decision.
So if I just make a comment on Christmas then, because I think it is appropriate to discuss that, and actually, in effect, it's part of the offer, or not, as the case may be. So you'll remember last year, part of the offer to staff was, in fact, to give them an additional day on Christmas Eve. That was an additional day. What then became apparent, and I wasn't aware of it, and I've been a councillor for 15 years or something or other, but every single member of staff has a day in their contract that is given to them by the council, and let's be clear, it was negotiated as part of a previous pay settlement. We just can't, it's not something that we can remove. And that there is one day. Now, obviously, there are 3 days between Christmas and New Year. What has become a custom, it is not contractual, and it's not been negotiated, but what has become a custom, and we've developed a really interesting phrase for it too. We give the staff an additional statutory, non-statutory holiday between Christmas and New Year. Thus, for them to have all the time off, which again, if you go back to why did the council do that? Because in those days we closed this building. We don't close this building now between Christmas and New Year because there's lots of other services operating from it. But we have a custom of giving away giving that second day. So I think we need to be clear as to whether that gifted day is something that remains. The staff have made it clear, I understand that, funnily enough, that they would like it to remain, but there is no reason for us to do so because it's not contractual, it's simply custom. So I think that is something that we should discuss, and if we can reach an agreement as to what we think is appropriate, with guidance from our HR colleagues, and we can make it clear that that's what the pay offer is this year. I don't know whether you want to comment on what I've just said, Mrs. Livingston.
I'm happy to, Chair. Just from a point of, just to note, obviously at the Joint Staff Consultative meeting, we didn't actually discuss Christmas closure, and it was the point which maybe wasn't very eloquently put in the report, was about that having a further discussion through joint staff, but obviously as an item they would like to keep it as a status quo. So the councillors stated that they would like to discuss that further. Now I appreciate we're in the Employment Committee, so we can do that. With regard to the extra statutory day, as you have set out, just for information, we are on local terms and conditions here at Surrey Heath, but there is obviously national terms and conditions. Now, when you move to local terms and conditions, normally your starting point is the national, and then over time, local elements then come in. So as part of the national terms and conditions, there is something entitled extra statutory days, and they are within what they call the Green Book of national terms and conditions. So that's where the term has come from. So it's just sort of stating that is the point. And as you say, rightly, the last time it went to the Joint Staff Consultative Group, and that was before there was an employment committee, it went in 2006 as an item, which is where that was last agreed. So I appreciate that is a long period of time. So yes, you can review, obviously, that set date, that extra statutory day. Whereas the additional days holiday, you are absolutely correct, that is within our terms and conditions. Now, that can be changed, but that is with full consultation So terms and conditions can be changed, but again, I feel like I've probably, hopefully sort of tried to clarify some points there, but again, I can take questions if anyone has anything specific. And I note that Councillor Bates has got his hand up, so.
I would just say that I don't particularly want to get into a discussion about removing the day that is part of the contractual terms and conditions. I think the only day that we should be discussing, if we want to discuss any day at this committee, is this additional one, and we'll take it from there. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I touch on Christmas, I just wanted to go back to the initial offer, and that was how that was made. What I would suggest going forward for next year is, because I think it's quite a difficult process, I think, for the members on the joint staff, is that when the staff put in their initial pay claim, whatever that may be, is at that point, I think it might be helpful for the councillors on the joint staff, along with yourself and perhaps the vice chair or the leader and the chief executive, to then meet in order to discuss how, as a joint collective councillors group, we may wish to respond to that. My impression this year and also last year is there were several different discussions in several different ways, and the kind of councillors' collective response therefore got confused. And that's not a criticism. I think that's perhaps the way that we are, but it's something I think next year maybe we can go forward and kind of look to have a collective position as councillors as far as is possible, and that may avoid some of the things going forward. In terms of Christmas, my kind of general view is I do think we need to be thinking about moving away from shutting at Christmas, but I would urge caution about trying to do it quickly, because yes, you've talked about the contractual aspect, and you've also talked about custom, and there is I can see it being argued all ways as to whether or not we actually have a custom and practice situation. So I think before making a decision on it tonight, I would suggest, I know you've got another committee meeting in about 6 weeks. I think it would be sensible to probably have an informal view maybe of councillors as to whether in theory you want to open at Christmas or not, because you've also got the 2 days which are nothing to do with whether it's custom or practice, but it's just that we shut between then and the staff take their own leave. I think that's all part of the process. And I suppose if councillors were, like me, inclined to say, I think now we should open at Christmas because there's no legitimate reason to close other than staff taking time off as a good time to do it, then that's something which probably needs some further negotiation and certainly cannot be imposed, at least not without looking at it very carefully based on the information that I've seen. So I would just urge you caution and maybe bring that back to your March meeting, because I do appreciate staff will want a decision as soon as possible in terms of planning for Christmas, whatever that might be.
Can I just ask, in terms of what you said there, you said you can't change the Christmas piece. Are you talking about you can't take the negotiated day away? Sorry, the contractual day away. What are you saying that we can't change?
There's 3 parts to the Christmas bit, just to confuse you all. There's the statutory day, if you like, the extra leave day, which is contractual, I believe, based on what I've seen. You then have what you've described correctly as custom, but that might be custom and practice, so it therefore might be contractual and needs a little bit of clarification first before you can make a decision on that. You can't just change it without doing that. You might be able to, but it needs a little bit more work at looking at. And then the final area is something which is this tradition of staff being asked to take 2 days, i.e. the council closes, but the staff take 2 leave days in order to cover the gap. So there's 3 separate parts, if you like. Now you can tell staff legally when they can take their leave, as long as you give adequate notice period for that. I would advise against it personally, but that you are entitled to, any employer can do that. But I would suggest that they're 3 slightly different things. So I'm sorry to kind of throw in something which is a little bit confusing, I appreciate, but they are slightly different. And Mrs. Ibbston might be able to clarify that as well if need be.
Well, the custom and practice, and again, I'm not trying to be pedantic, I just want to be really clear. The Custom and practice means, in fact, staff only have to take 1 day off between Christmas and New Year, not 2, because we gift them an additional day called an extra non-statutory day.
Yeah, so 1 day is, I would suggest, contractual, but I just need to be absolutely sure with all the paperwork. The second is what could potentially be custom and practice, or custom, you've used that word, in which case, in effect, it's arguably contractual. And then the third area, as I've mentioned, which is the staff taking their own days. But it's not as simple. If something is custom, without getting into kind of all the technicalities, it's not as easy to say you can definitely move it or definitely can't. It entirely depends on the circumstances. And I'm sorry if that sounds vague, but it is vague. So that is the reality, I'm afraid, of custom and practice.
Oh, mine says log off. What does that mean? I can go home. Brilliant. Oh, good. Leader.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Bates that I think it would be helpful if there was a more formal process for just managing the members' side. I think the joint staff members, the representatives, do an excellent job, and obviously they meet and discuss, and I agree a position, but I don't think we have that same kind of formality, and I think that was kind of missing this year, and we could have responded better. So I think I would urge the HR and Chief Exec to just put in place a more formal process where we can discuss and then review. The 350 starting point, I was happy with the 350 starting point. It was, in any negotiations, there's a starting point, and I believe the officers, the staff asked the Chief Exec to start off rather than the other way around. And we said 350, and I think they came back with 650, and lo and behold, our offer changed to 500, which is exactly in the midpoint, and they stuck at 650. I personally am happy at the 500. I think it has to be in balance with the finances, and I think 500 is a fixed sum, with the percentages helping or more appropriate to the lower levels. I also think the staff are seeing the second year of a difficult pay rise, if at all, or certainly a disappointing one. I think very few got a pay rise, and it was only kind of the last minute. We had proposed, the administration had proposed 0, and at the budget discussion, it got changed to, I think, the first 3 levels got a percentage. So the vast majority of our staff didn't get one. And here we are again saying, you know, this is another poor offering. We'd love to give you 2, 3, 4% to make up for it, but this is where we are financially. And I think we should be doing everything we can to counter the argument of a disappointing pay rise offer with trying to make the staff feel valued. You know, everything we want to do through this council is done through the staff. And if they're not here, then things don't get done. And I think now is not the time to be discussing removing holiday. Not only are we going to, and I don't want to get into, you know, there's the contractual one. We're not talking about removing that. There's the custom and practice, and my experience as with Councillor Bates, you might have found the same, Councillor Betton, at work. Custom and practice can become contractual. You have to be careful with that one, and it may not be just easy to remove, but I don't think we should even be discussing removing it whilst we're in a position where we are giving what everybody agrees, I think, is a disappointing pay rise after a 0 last year. And I have no problem at all, however, about discussing, or the officers, the Chief Exec and HR, etc., discussing whether we close at Christmas or not. You know, that's something that can be discussed. My understanding is depending on where Christmas Day falls, it's 6 years in a row, it's 3 days you need to close, and the 7th year, you actually need 4 days, which I think is maybe where it lands. That's what we do. We've got 6 years of 3 and 1 year of 4, depending on how it lands. But that's a red herring there. What I'm saying is that the Chief Exec and the members can discuss whether we should stay open or not and how that affects their holidays. But that doesn't take away their actual holidays, does it? So, okay, that's my view.
Okay. Just sort of my thoughts on that. So I agree with what you've said and what Councillor Bates has said. We probably need to come back with the pay negotiation process. We need to understand where all of the constituent parts fit and who does what, when, and to whom. And I think if we could bring that back to the next committee, then that would be useful in terms of everyone then being clear as to what the process will be at the next run. In terms of Christmas, I think there does need to be a conversation, and in essence, does the council still want to close at Christmas? We don't. The reality is we don't. We don't shut the building. Police operate from here. We do meals from home on Christmas Day. The council functions in that time. So we probably need to make a decision as to whether we do want to close or not, and then that makes a point. I take on board also entirely what you said about that extra non-statutory day. Given that I think we all think that the offer on the table is not what we would like to give, it's not what we'd like to receive either, I guess. It might be in the scheme of things, quite a good offer. I don't know how things will pan out elsewhere, but it's probably not a wise time to be arguing about that day. We can take that away, think about it as the council, as this committee and whatever, and then decide what we will do beyond 2022. But I guess I put on the table, I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Bennett, I put on the table that we go with our offer of £500 and leave the extra non-statutory day in place for 2022. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. I'm kind of coming at this from the private sector viewpoint. A lot of companies I know haven't had pay rises for some years. In that time, we've had low inflation. We've had kind of stability, but everything's not wonderful. But if you've got a job, everything's okay. We are now coming into a point where we've got significant inflation again. We have got energy prices going through the roof, which will affect this council and this building. Now, we shut down between Christmas and New Year because we don't want to heat the building, because all of our customers are shut down as well. There's no point people coming in. But here, people needs to come in because, as you say, Meals on Wheels and so on. So we've got a different situation, and cash is king. And cash is something that the council is not really flowing with. We have got issues with paying for this award, whatever we decide. If we decide to do it, and I can understand that staff want it because, they are having to pay their increased costs. They are having to sort of cope with the food inflation, the energy inflation and everything else. I'm totally convinced that the idea of a single monetary amount across all grades is the way to go. Worked for Jack Jones in the 1970s. Why won't it work for us now? But there is another side to that. If cash is king, increased pay awards may well lead to fewer jobs. And I think people need to be aware of that. Because if the council had an unlimited supply of cash, you can do what you like. My business does not do that. We have to pay for everything that we do. And if we award people money in terms of a pay rise, it's because they've been promoted, it's because their productivity has gone up, it's because we've got new contracts in, and so on and so on and so forth. It pays for itself. It's not related simply to inflation. It's related to growth. We do not have growth in the income of the council. We have reduction in the income of the council at the moment. I don't know if that's an answer, but it's something that people need to be aware of.
I think agreed on most points, Councillor. Mrs Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. I've written lots of things down here, so I'm hoping some of them make some sense. I was actually at the joint staff meeting. I think there was Sharon and I who were actually there, who are here now, and Rodney was via Zoom. The staff gave a very good presentation. It was basically they wanted more money and all these different reasons, and I can understand them putting that forward. I was disappointed that we as members didn't have a lot of information beforehand. It would have been good if we'd got the staff presentation or even something of ourselves that we were putting forward. We had nothing that was showing what the different percentages would yield, for the staff. As far as the gifted day, I'd never heard of that, and I've been a councillor even longer than you, Councillor Duggan, which is a long time. So I've never heard of that before until it was brought up. I think also at the meeting we said not all councils have done their pay settlements yet. I believe one had offered 0. I can't remember if it was 1 or 2%. Mrs Livingston, you said a couple of the others had. Guildford and Runnymede aren't doing theirs till July yet, which is a sort of another option, though I believe it's a statutory that we have to make a decision now. I think one thing that I would be quite pleased with, as apart from, yes, it's always as cash is king, as Councillor Betton has said, but also agile working. That has to be a bit of a benefit. If somebody said to me when I was at work, I only had to go in 1 day a week, I'd be very happy. Although you do work more, but it's the cost of getting there and the hassle with the traffic and toing and froing. So I think that is a benefit that nobody has actually talked about, or maybe I'm wrong. What else? I think I'm happy at the £500. I think the staff do need some kind of recognition. But we were asked actually at the joint staff meeting by staff themselves as to where the money would come from, which drew a silence. So I think we need to think more about that. And I also think that that in future, when we're discussing salaries, as I said, there's only three of us there, which we need to have more members. Maybe it's a different meeting or something, or if it comes to the employment as opposed to joint staff before then. But I think there needs to be more discussion and more members involved than there were on the day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just to cover a couple of those points, in your comment, Councillor Betton, about this being needed to be paid for, it was positioned, I'm sure not in a provocative way, but nonetheless, that whatever paid had to come out of a balanced budget, and that meant that cost savings would have to be made for any rise, and the bottom line is cost savings equal people's jobs. That's a harsh reality, and the staff were aware of that, and they took that on board as part of the discussions and have come forward with this. And whatever award we give, as you say, we will need to balance the budget. I think it's a good point about working from home, although you'll remember from many of the policies that we've been through, we do actually have a very flexible working regime at the council. There is flexible working, there's flexi time, there's flexi blink and everything, as far as I can tell. We are a good employer. It doesn't. I don't think it would hurt to remind people that they do have far greater working from home opportunity than they had previously. But I don't think we negotiate that in right now. It's something that's part of it, part of the policies that we already have in place. Councillor Gordon.
Hiya. I fully support the £500. Would like to give more, but as we all said, we just can't afford it. But I think in recognition of what the staff have done and the fact of the past few years we've given that extra day, I'd like to formalise the extra day and give it to my contract, and that way that day's guaranteed for them and won't take them in the future. So I think it's just the least we can do for the team. The team morale does need a bit of reassurance. The team needs to know that we have got their backs and we'd like to give more if possible. So the least we can do is formalise that extra day for them and show the fact they won't be withdrawn in the future. That's just my point of view.
Councillor Mrs Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I think the general feeling from everyone in the room is that we just wish we could do more, but just as it stands at the moment, we can't. I think when we vote and we make whatever award we make, we do need to be mindful of the cost of replacement. And sometimes a saving can actually end up providing quite a long-term cost. And I think we just need to be mindful of that. We know how much time it takes for every single member of staff that we need to replace. I think the working from home and the flexible strategy, yes, I think we've got fabulous policies and very good policies in terms of working from home, but I think most organisations now have moved to that. Maybe not willingly and maybe not deliberately, but having tried it, I think all of us have found that actually it works very well. And not only does the individual have a cost saving, but in some cases, and in many cases, so do we as a council, because should we grow in the future, we would know that we don't need to have one desk, one person sort of facilities within the office. And maybe when we look at some of our more long-term objectives as to what may or may not be happening in this building, we may be in a position whereby we can generate additional revenue in the short term by letting out extra space, because actually we don't need that whole-time desk. So I think that benefit works both ways. And whereas in the past our flexible working policy maybe was a huge incentive to work for us, actually I think most companies now have adopted it. Personally, my company was going to sign premises. We're not going to sign premises now. We will never go back to working all together. We'll just meet a couple of times a month, and it makes everybody much, much happier. Not that we don't like each other, but there we go. So we just mean to be mindful that it's not that greater benefit. That's all.
I think it's still a great benefit. It's just not unique anymore. Councillor Bett.
Thank you, Chair. Just thinking about the issue of working from home, and I know that we have a policy. You get tax breaks if you have a home office. You can claim stuff on income tax. Are we taking advantage of that for the staff that do it? Is there, and this is not something to be answered now. It's maybe something to think about for the future. Is there any way of incentivising people working from home that would lead to a kind of pay rise, which would enable fewer people to be working here, which means we could have a smaller council office? Looking outside the box of what we do now, review the whole issue of where people work, how much that costs and how much benefit they could obtain from working from home as their main workplace. As we're an employment committee, that's something to think about perhaps.
I think it's an interesting task to hand directly to the officers to come back and tell us what they think about the idea of, how to say it, I've been a contracted home worker for many, many years until April of this year, rather annoyingly. April of last year, rather annoyingly. And I work in London and have to pay for myself to get there. I've never had a tax break, but I think there might be a difference between having a home office and being a home worker. But, however, the task has, I think, been accepted by the nodding heads, which is good. Councillor McLafferty.
Can I just, it's only a very small point, but we've discussed how our pay rise is paid for, and people are saying jobs, okay? And people can make the mistake of saying jobs equals redundancy, right? What pays for pay rises is actually not jobs, it's productivity improvement. right? And obviously, if there's 5 in a team and you want to go down to 4, yes, you would make 1 redundant. But a better way would be that you're a team of 5 and you're currently 4 and there's a vacancy, and you discuss how the 4 can take on the extra work and not fill that vacancy. Therefore, there's no redundancy, but there's a productivity improvement and a saving of a salary. And I, for one, and I think I probably speak for everybody here, would hope that the chief exec and the officers and the CMT are looking to do that before they do anything else. That's the priority. We don't want to lose any more of the staff, right? We want to actually just increase the productivity, and that's how you pay for the pay rise, not necessarily by swathes of people leaving their jobs.
Agreed on that. Any Councillor Chapter?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There is, of course, a second point to concern ourselves about, the increasing use of working from home, and Councillor Benton has touched on this, that we pay for these pay rises by the income that we earn as a council. One of the big concerns that industry and business in general, particularly the retail trade and the hospitality trade, have been concerned very much about, particularly the impact of the COVID epidemic, is the impact on footfall in places where employees at lunchtime may go out to buy food, may take the opportunity to go to various retail premises and buy things whilst they are taking their break. And of course, if that footfall falls, then that puts pressure on the retail and hospitality trade. And the possibility that those businesses may close down impacts us doubly, because we may be the landlords of the retail units that they occupy, but we're also certainly recipients of business rates. So we must look at this from 2 points of view, uniquely because of our position as the council who benefit from footfall within our town centre, that whilst it may be advantageous for our employees to be able to work from home, there is a possibility that as a consequence our income as council may drop, and it's like taking money out from one side and not replacing it from the other. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we're not discussing working from home policies today. We already have, as we've already agreed, quite generous working from home, flexible working policy. We're not changing that this evening. It's not going to change footfall in the town centre. We're just agreeing that it's a part of the package that officers have. So I think Councillor Jennings-Evans. It was. I was almost at the, yeah.
You were hopeful then, Councillor Dugan. No, in general, I completely, apologies that I've not got my my screen on. Most of you may or may not know I have shingles at the moment, so I'm keeping myself to myself. But my comment was going to be in relation, there's been a lot of discussion on home working tonight, and I just wanted to say, moving forward, although it may be advantageous for us financially for people to work from home, can we please just bear in mind the effect on mental health for our employees? Whilst some thrive in an office environment and others thrive at home, their mental health, it must be paramount in any decisions that we make in the future. But I appreciate, as you've already said, Councillor Dugan, we're not discussing home working policy at the moment.
Good. Okay, so I think we've probably discussed all of the discussions that we want. If I were to sort of sum up where we are, and I just want to make one particular point to Councillor Gordon's point. I would rather, as I had stated earlier, that we take that extra non-statutory day away for further discussion, but that we agree this evening that it will be part of the offer in 2022. Okay? And it seems also to me that from the discussion this evening that and we'll hopefully come to a decision, or a unanimous decision as a committee that we will then recommend to Council, that we stick with little 2, a £500 award on all scale points, with the rider that the extra statutory day for 2022 will absolutely remain in place. We, as a committee, will ask the officers to bring that back. Again, the sooner the better, because as soon as people know that it's not going to be there or is going to be there in 2023, and I think to points that have already been made, we might not have much choice. So let's just bring it back with some further thought and evidence so that we can actually make a decision or not, as the case may be. But are we agreed as a committee that we are going to recommend to full council little to £500, leaving the extra statutory day in place for this Christmas? And that would appear to be unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Turn my iPad on. I've got it on the longest setting I can, but it's not long enough. Okay, item 6, safeguarding policy and procedure. Where are my notes? Okay, so the update to this policy, because again, all of these policies are updates to existing policies. In the safeguarding policy, it largely simply corrects contacts for reporting, and it also highlights DBS and its position with elected members. And basically, councillors don't get DBS because we don't fall within the categories that would have us do that. That obviously means as councillors we need to be careful what we're doing. We're in a position, we need to be careful for our own selves, that we need to make sure that we're in a position that doesn't compromise us. But I think that those are the main changes to the safeguarding policy and procedure. Where's my... that's interesting. I don't know whether anyone wants to make comment or question on the policy. Let's get past there. So we are recommended to resolve that the safeguarding policy and procedure set out Annex A to this report be agreed. Can we... Oh, wait. Well, that was a vote, was it? Excellent. I was rather concerned it was a I'd like to speak. Okay, that is agreed. Thank you very much. So we're now on to casual, fixed term and temporary workers policy and procedure. And actually, this is mostly, again, it's about process. And it's updating the process around resourcing. There's a specific form that the council has that needs to be filled in to get approval for casual workers. In fact, it comes up again in the recruitment policy, and that form needs to go to the CEO for approval, which again I think makes sense. Me travelling to Birmingham on the train goes to my CEO for approval. So I think employing people is reasonable for a council to go to its CEO. That is, in effect, the largest change to that policy. Again, comments or questions? If not, let me find the recommendation. Committee is advised to resolve that the revised casual, fixed term and agency workers policy and procedures set out as Annex A to this report be agreed. Oh, wait. Councillor Mrs. Wheeler.
Thank you, Councillor Dugan. It's actually with reference to the fixed term worker and a category that potentially I'm not sure that we can see here. I'm sure there are occasions when, although it says when a specific project or when a task is complete, it's the covering off of a service type agreement from an individual versus a per diem individual, and it's just where that would fit. because they're not strictly speaking a fixed term worker, or would that come under a separate services contract? It was just trying to understand a little bit of clarity around that, if possible.
Mrs. Simmons.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. So we have, like you said, we have a casual contract, we have a fixed term contract, so that's an employee. So that would be taken on for a period for a project, as you said, or for, to ensure that a service delivery is made. And then we have agency workers or contractors. So, and that's coming via a specific agency, so they have their own contract. So it all comes down to the different contracts as to how they're appointed. Does that answer your question?
Thanks. If I can come back. I suppose really it's because it's an area in which I work pretty much all the time. And that is not strictly speaking as an agency worker, but effectively an agency worker type person that is supplied on a fixed term deliverables based contract. So if, for example, we wanted a marketing strategy, we may go to a supplier, be that an agency or a services company, to say we wish to have a marketing strategy written. And actually, if the person is very small, very slow, and it takes them 100 days, or really quick and efficient, and we're happy with it after 50 days, it's irrelevant. But we would agree, often based on a per diem rate. It's that specifically, I suppose, that I am looking for, to see where that would fit, or whether in fact that would come under a services contract and not under this. So it would be a services contract. I've got nods there from Louise Livingston. That's absolutely fine. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Excuse me a minute, Chair. Could you press your microphone button, please?
Apologies. Apologies. Yes, so this is similar to the casual workers policy in terms of what the updates are. It's around introducing the staff and resources form and the process that leads to it being agreed by the Chief Executive. There's also updates to the job profiles, the form is also used when we're making updates to job profiles, even if it's a like-for-like replacement. But it's basically just trying to formalise us around this process and this particular form. Any comments or questions? And if not, the committee is advised to resolve that the revised recruitment policy and procedure set out as Annex A to this report be agreed. Most excellent. Health and safety. These policies are too long. Right, health and safety. Again, the main change to this policy is actually just a change in to reflect the fact that Damien is now the CEO. I think is the main change. In fact, that's really pretty much all I've got to say. Comments, questions? If not, the committee is advised to resolve that the updated health and safety policy statement of intent set out Annex A to this report be adopted. Agreed, agreed, agreed. Excellent. Right. Right. Agenda item 10, review of health and safety organisation. And really this is just outlining the job titles and the players, so Joe Fulbrook and Nick Stevens, I believe. So again, it's just an update, administrative update on the whole. We are advised to resolve that the updated health and safety policy organisation, Site Annex A to this report, be adopted. Agreed? Most splendid. Right, agenda item 11, Joint Staff Consultative Group Consultation.
There are a couple of typos within it that they probably just need to be looked at. It's where we have changed the he, she to they. It still says is and not are. That's all, if that could just be picked up. Sorry to be pedantic.
That was in the previous paper, not this one. Health and Safety Organisation. Yeah. Can that just be updated and corrected? Okay, so the Joint Staff Consultative Group Constitution 2C. What we're done with 2C. My notes have let me down, Mrs. Livingston.
This is just, again, mainly job titles and just making sure that we're in line with ensuring that the Employment Committee is referenced correctly between the relationship between joint staff and the whole process. But as I say, there's also job title changes. But equally, Ms. Willis is here, so if she wants us to add anything, but I think that's all the items, isn't it? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, comments or questions? No, so we're advised to recommend to full council that the revised Joint Staff Consultative Group Constitution as attached to Annex A to this report be adopted. Are we agreed? Excellent. Now then. So agenda item 12, the work programme, which we've just added to. But we've got a meeting in March, which you can see, and we will, do you think we can bring to that this? We'd like to have a discussion about how the whole pay process piece works, so we can agree that. And we, again, if it's, and it doesn't need to be March, I don't think, given it's, we're talking about, I guess, this time next year for 2023, but we need to have either at the next meeting or the one after the non-statutory day at Christmas. Yep.
So, Chair, yeah, I can confirm that, so we currently have the annual pay settlement procedure, so I will update that and put that onto the work programme for March. With regards to the Christmas item, if it's okay, we can bring that to July, which is for 2023 onwards. So we'll put that into July, and that will be joint staff in June. The other item, just to bring up, there was also an option around looking at a medium-term pay award. And again, it's another item that could be added to the work programme for further discussion. So again, this was linking it to the medium-term financial strategy. But again, it needed further discussion, and that was something that everybody agreed on. But it's another item to look at adding to the work programme if you were in agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it won't hurt for us to discuss. Leaving that till the summer probably makes sense, by which point we'll be through budgets and all sorts, and that might be a better time for us to discuss it in order to take it back to joint staff. So we'll just add the pay process in here, and then July or June or July, whatever you said it was, we can do statutory, extra non-statutory day and medium-term pay settlement. Okay. Here endeth the meeting. Thank you very much.